Ay la 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 ay la ay la ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la la ay la la ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 ay la 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 la. Shabbat shalom, everyone. So, you know, one of the amazing things about the Jewish relationship to the passage of time is the Jewish calendar, which of course is something that is cyclical. It goes in a spiral through our lifetimes. And one of the things we learn as we go through the holidays each year is we have this ability, as the holidays hit, for us to reflect how we've grown and changed through time. As yet we're affirming what doesn't change, which is Jewish sacred time. So, you know, who would have imagined a year ago at this Pesach that the world would look like this as it looks right now? It is truly extraordinary. And we're all, of course, always talking about how we are now seeing Pesach through radically different eyes now. This night really is different from all others in what we're going through. We really are experiencing, as our ancestors did, the constriction of Mitzrayim. And of course, the grim realization that so many of us have over and over again is that our ancestors got out of Mitzrayim, but at this moment, we're still in Mitzrayim. This crisis is not over yet. And that's a very difficult reality for all of us to have to shoulder in our lives. And, you know, what do we do, right? Most of us either have moments where we're kind of freaked out, and then we try really hard to distract ourselves, you know, in whatever way we can. You know, I certainly have done my share of Netflix binge watching, that's for sure. But that's not necessarily the Jewish way to respond to a moment of crisis. And that's actually what I want to talk about today, the Jewish way of relating to a moment like this, because as I often say, this ain't our first rodeo. In the Parsha that we just read this morning, we have this truly remarkable, extraordinary moment where Moses, in the midst of his pleading for forgiveness for the Israelites, he suddenly has this deeply human moment of just bursting out with yearning. He says, Hareini na et kvodecha. God, please show me your glory. Let me look upon you, God. I want to see you. And God famously says, a human being can't look directly at me and live. And then God has compassion on Moses and says, but I'll tell you what, you can't look directly at me. So go hide in that crag in the rock over there. And I'm going to cause myself to pass right in front of you, but I'm going to take the divine hand and put it, ooh, that was dramatic. Take the divine hand and put that over you so you can't see. And then only after I passed by, you can see my back. So it was Maimonides who famously explained something that I often explain as well, which is, he said that the Torah is written in concrete terms because it's written for people in biblical times who really needed very concrete imagery in order to express profoundly spiritual ideas. And in fact, this moment, like so many moments in the Torah, is something that we can read as a spiritual metaphor for what we go through in life when we confront life when it is most mysterious, when we live in complete uncertainty. We don't understand the extent of what it is that we're in the midst of. We can't seem to look directly at it. How is it that God can allow such a thing to happen, like a pandemic? And the answer is that this is a moment where God is covering over our ability to see, and God is passing by, but there will come a point when we will be able to look back and understand what this was and what it means and what its implications are for our lives for future generations. That, of course, is exactly what the Israelites went through. And their night, when the slaying of the firstborn was happening, they, like us, were holed up in their homes, afraid, uncertain. And it was only after everything had happened, after they had completely passed through and left Egypt and gone through the Red Sea and made it to Mount Sinai, that they finally received Torah, and they could finally see what it was all for and what it was all about. And that's exactly what Khatam Sofer says, the commentary, Khatam Sofer, who says, one is only able to recognize God's ways and his behavior after the fact. Only after time has passed it is possible to link together all the facts can one understand a little of the way God acts. Now, we could psychologize this, and we can say, in psychology, we talk about this process when people go through trauma, that, there's this process of healing we can go through where we find the silver linings, where we learn how to reframe past experience in order to derive meaning from it, and that helps us to cope with it. And that's a tried and true psychological approach to life's difficulties. But what I want to teach today is that Judaism isn't just saying that. Judaism is actually saying something quite more profound and more spiritual than just that psychological insight. In a sense, Judaism pushes us beyond that to find meaning, to find what is going on to the extent that we can, right in the middle of the crisis, even before it's over. And as an example, we'll go back to that night of the slaying of the firstborn. The Israelites were afraid in their homes. They didn't know what was going to happen, as I said. But fascinatingly, the command to observe Pesach, the laws about the observing of Pesach and how Nisan is the first of the years, excuse me, all of that comes before we get out of Egypt. That command rises up right in the middle of that darkest hour when death was all around the Israelites. The command that we're going to get out of this, and we're going to mark this moment in time forevermore, for all generations to remember what this moment means. That happened before it was over. And that's a fascinating insight that I want us to just sort of hold on to that insight as I try to teach this notion. There's a kind of Jewish superpower that we have, that we got a taste of at our Pesach Seders. And I want to expound on that a little bit now, and keep in mind what the Israelites went through that night. There was a very interesting article this past week in the New York Times by Emily Esfahani Smith, and she is the author of a book called The Power of Meaning, Finding Fulfillment in a World Obsessed with Happiness. I love that title. And she actually draws a lot of her teachings from the very famous Jewish psychologist Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of Auschwitz. And she quotes an expression that he coined, and that expression is tragic optimism. Tragic optimism. And what is tragic optimism? Well, Frankl talked a lot about the survivors whom he witnessed when he was in the camps. And he drew some conclusions about these survivors. He noticed that the toughest survivors seemed to be the people who were not paralyzed by the horror and the fear and the terror of where they found themselves. The toughest survivors were people who didn't just passively wait for someone to come save them from the outside. No, the survivors he talks about who had the greatest chance of surviving the camps were the people who were radically focused on the present moment. The people who were radically practical with what resources they have right in front of them, right here, right now. How can I make use of these resources in order to survive and to get through this? And they were harsh realists. They weren't necessarily happier than anybody else in the camps. They were just as horrified as the people who were paralyzed. But somehow, Frankl teaches that those survivors seem to have all shared in common something that he called a tragic optimism. They were able to push through it and keep going forward. And why, he concluded? The answer is because they seem to have held on to a sense of overarching purpose to their lives right there in that moment. In other words, as they went through this, they were able to cultivate a meaning, a whole identity around who I am right here in the midst of this horrific experience of being in the camps. They constructed an identity right then and there. And it seems that they all shared a common narrative, a common story that they wanted to tell that gave strength to that purpose and that identity. And you know what that one common story was? They were all laser focused on this. I have to survive because I have to tell the world what happened here. That's so many of them held fast to that notion, and that notion fired their passion to live and to survive and to stay present and focused. I have to get out of here. I have to survive this because I have to teach the world what this was so that all the world can learn what happened here. It's extraordinary to think about how those individuals, some of whom, by the way, didn't make it. You know, survivor doesn't mean that you live indefinitely. It just means it's a way of embracing life in the most extraordinary and most Jewish way, because they're an echo of the Israelites who were there in their homes as death was passing them by. At that moment, in the midst of the darkness, they too were affirming, we are going to survive this because we have to share with the world the story of what happened here on this night that is different from all other nights. And indeed, that message has fueled our survival as a people for thousands of years. And here we are now, in our time, going through another moment of darkness in humanity. And it is now up to us now to cultivate meaning and purpose and an identity defined by this reality that we find ourselves in. Indeed, we have to tell the story of what happened here. You know, it is not the Jewish way simply to try to get through it and that's it, and then we'll just go back to normal. That is not the Jewish response. The Jewish response is to use this moment to cultivate a vision for what is it going to be like after we get out of here. What is the world going to be like? What is our plan for how we're going to tell the story of what we have learned from this so that the world can be forever different as a result of this? And what is that story we're going to tell? Well, we can't know the whole story yet, right? You know, we have that hand of God now that is blocking our view of what is happening as it's passing by us right now. But we also have a promise that we will be able to look back when it is past and tell the story. But there's another aspect of that image that I want us to, that many people don't notice. What was blocking their view? I mean, Moses' view at that time, it was the hand of God that was right in front of him, right? So at that moment, he knew that God was there. That purpose, that meaning is there, even as it's passing by. And that's what the Israelites realized. We are witnessing the hand of God right now. We really are. And that's a frightening thing because it doesn't, it exposes grim realities before us. But now we must begin to put together what is the story we are going to tell? What is the Haggadah we have from this now? Right? Well, we can certainly bring up some things we've already learned. We've learned things about how human fallibility, human greed, human desire for power over others, those kind of things, and hateful words that are spoken that tear people and societies apart. We see that those things have impacts way beyond just hateful words. We see that those things have profound impacts on our environment, on our health, on the entire planet, and potentially on the survival of humanity itself. We're seeing that people who think that some lives are more valuable and more important than others, who cling to privilege over others, that sense of importance and privilege is just an illusion. That in truth, what we're witnessing is that we are all profoundly equal. We are all completely equally in the image of God. We are all the same all over this world. We are learning that we must survive to teach the world that it can never be the same again after this crisis, that we're bearing witness to extraordinary people, doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, people on the front lines, and these leaders who we just prayed for. These are the people who are helping and healing this world. And they're not looking at what color people's skin are. They're not looking at who's more important or who's wealthier or who has more, can do more favors for them. These are the people who are just treating people because they are human beings. That's another important story, part of our story we need to show the world when we get out of this. We're also learning an extraordinary story about the power of technology. You know, what we've been witnessing up till now is all of the ways that technology has done amazing things, but it has been also tearing apart the fabric of society. We're seeing how people have been using technology to manipulate and to sow the seeds of hatred and to tear us apart. And now look right in front of you at this computer screen. We're looking at the power of technology and how it should be used. The moral use of technology, how it is there as an extraordinary tool for us to bring us together and to create community and to heal the divisions between us. That is the power of technology that we have to take with us from this experience and cultivate and figure out how to learn more to bring human beings together and not tear each other apart. And finally, of course, we're learning about what the real leaders are and what we have to lift up as our true leaders in this world and the world after this crisis. Leaders of character, leaders of principle, leaders of compassion who understand wisdom and kindness. Those are the leaders we need in this world, and not greedy and selfish leadership. Our job, in short, right now is to be tragic optimists. In the middle of tragedy, to now begin to put together our plan. We have to stay safe. We have to take care of each other. We have to make sure that those who are helping us stay safe as well. And then we have to plan. We have to plan for what we're going to tell the world. Because when this is over, I hope and pray that we can all come out of our homes, embrace the world and embrace life, teaching the world, as the Jewish people, a message of building and healing, a message of creating a world where there is compassion and kindness, safety and health and justice for all humanity and for all this planet. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it come speedily and in good time, and we all say Amen.